Welcome to Tomorrow Unveiled, where we take a stack of the most crucial, corroborated data from the last week and synthesize it into the knowledge you need to be future-proofed.
And welcome to Tomorrow Unveiled. The sources our dedicated research team has compiled over the past week, spanning January 4th through the 11th, 2026. They paint a picture of immense volatility.
The theme of this deep dive is fittingly future-proofed. Our mission today is to give you a clear-eyed synthesis of the key trends where technological acceleration, primarily driven by AI, is hitting some significant societal and geopolitical friction.
That friction isn't incidental, it is the core story. What our sources show really clearly is this deep growing tension between the promise of technological abundance.
Right. Limitless computing power, personalized systems, all of that.
Exactly. Incredible productivity.
Right.
And then you have the brutal economic reality of the structural inequality in its distribution. We're achieving technological parity with our wildest dreams, but that benefit is being captured by a very, very narrow segment of the global population.
Exactly. So the world is being pulled in two directions at the same time. Our research team refers to this period as a violent transition. And for you, the listener, this means a very specific survival requirement, what they're terming a dual competency.
Yes, and understanding this framework is, I think, essential for navigating the next decade. You really need two things to thrive right now. First, you need technical literacy.
Okay.
The cognitive capacity to understand, manage, and co-work with an economy that's increasingly run by agentic AI and next-generation physics. And second, you need resilience.
Resilience.
The ability to survive in a fragmenting, volatile, and deeply K-shaped socioeconomic reality.
Right. Okay, let's stop on that K-shaped idea for just a moment.
Yeah.
For our listener who might be catching up, we aren't just talking about a general gap between rich and poor. What does that K-shape look like in practice today?
It's defined by a simultaneous divergence. So the top arm of the K, that's technology, finance, specialized, skilled labor. It sees accelerating growth, wealth, and opportunity. They capture the abundance.
Right. They're going up.
They're going up. The bottom arm of the K, traditional manufacturing, service sectors, and especially early career workers, sees stagnation, decline, and increased precarity. When we talk about resilience, we mean the economic and political stability required just to stay on that top track.
So our mission today is to synthesize all these intersecting forces. The macro overview, and this is corroborated across every piece of analysis we have, is the massive and irreversible shift of AI.
It's moved from being an experimental tool, something you might, play with,
A novel
to
thing.
becoming foundational infrastructure. And it's doing this across three domains we're going to cover in depth: work, education, and global power.
So let's unpack this by starting with the most immediate friction point, the human equation and the job market. The first major trend that just leaps out from the data is a profound psychological shift happening across the U.S. workforce. Our research team calls it sustainable realism.
Sustainable realism.
Yeah, and think back to the prior year's mentality. The Great Resignation, the YOLO economy. A whopping 93% of workers were willing to test the market for a new job. They felt empowered, mobile, optimistic.
That era of aggressive job hunting is completely over. It's an incredible plummet in confidence. That willingness to move has dropped so sharply, with only 43% of employees now planning to change jobs this year.
Wow.
Workers have basically traded optimism for a deeply defensive posture. They are prioritizing stability, or just what they already have, over seeking new experiences.
The numbers really bear this out. When they were polled, 57% of employees cited stability due to uncertainty as the key factor driving their decision to stay put.
And, this isn't necessarily loyalty to their current employer.
No, it's fear.
It's a profound fear of the unknown in the broader labor market. They've seen the headlines, they've seen the volatility, they're hunkering down.
And their biggest concern isn't just a existential job loss, it's the cost of staying alive. A significant 58% of employees are concerned that their pay is simply not keeping up with the rising cost of living.
And 57% are reporting their purchasing power has already declined over the last 12 months. So they've shifted entirely from seeking better experiences to desperately protecting their existing income. They recognize that uncertainty is now an economic feature, not a bug.
This fear feeds directly into what our team calls the AI Job Displacement Paradox, which is fueling the anxiety we see everywhere. Nearly half of all workers, 49%, are concerned that AI directly threatens their job or even their entire industry.
And tellingly, 52% anticipate an increase in nationwide layoffs over the coming year. They are just bracing for impact.
That anxiety is so palpable, but here is where the deeper research provides some really necessary context. And we need to introduce what the team calls the scapegoat theory.
The scapegoat theory. Okay, so when you look at the raw numbers, the whole displacement narrative, it gets complicated really quickly. It's not a simple one-to-one correlation.
Right. So if we zoom out, an analysis highlighted by our research team, and this is derived from Oxford Economics, found that while 55,000 U.S. job cuts in 2025 were explicitly attributed to AI, that number is actually marginal compared to the monthly baseline.
How marginal are we talking?
Well, under normal non-crisis conditions, the U.S. experiences between 1.5 million to 1.8 million layoffs every single month.
Every month.
Okay.
So 55,000 cuts over an entire year, while of course tragic for those affected, is statistically insignificant in the context of the total labor churn.
Exactly.
So the core finding of the scapegoat theory is that firms are potentially using AI adoption as a convenient mask, a cover story.
So they're basically rebranding a managerial failure or maybe a strategic retreat as a future-forward investment. How does that spin sound in quarterly earnings calls?
Oh, it's incredibly effective, and we see the language used across the board. If a company overexpanded or misjudged demand or is simply facing a cyclical downturn, admitting poor management or market failure, investor confidence.
But blaming it on AI.
Blaming it on aggressively adopting forward-looking AI technology allows them to reframe a failure as a technological necessity that promises future efficiency. It positions the company as lean, forward-thinking, and ruthless, all traits that are often rewarded by the market.
So the anxiety isn't unfounded, but the cause isn't just the AI itself. It's the corporate strategy that's leveraging AI to justify cuts that were maybe already planned.
Maybe. But you noted that the real threat is changing, and that the structural reorganization is very real.
Absolutely. The threat is not replacement en masse across all demographics, but a structural reorganization that impacts specific groups very severely. The venture capital world is predicting 2026 to be the year of agents.
Which means AI moves fundamentally from augmentation to automation.
And that distinction is critical. Augmentation means the AI helps me do my current job faster. Automation means
the AI does the entire job or an entire workflow without me. Precisely. And this automation targets the lower levels of the economy.
how so?
The research confirms that entry-level and early career jobs are disproportionately impacted because they often involve the repetitive, routine cognitive tasks that AI agents are now excelling at.
And we have data on that.
We do. Specifically, the job finding rate for workers aged 20 to 24 in occupations most exposed to AI has seen a notable decline since its peak in late 2023. This is the first tangible signal that AI is not just coming for the spreadsheet jockey, it's closing the door on the person who might have been the next spreadsheet jockey.
This just accelerates the development of that bifurcated, K-shaped economy we discussed earlier.
It does. Companies restructure to employ a small core of highly compensated senior leaders backed by powerful AI agents and a very limited number of entry-level workers who are now expected to have that dual competency we talked about.
Right, they have to be highly technical and highly resilient.
And that entire middle layer of routine specialist work where most workers gain experience and move up, that's the part being squeezed out, creates a terrifying bottleneck.
So how are workers facing this fundamental structural reorganization fighting back?
The answer is collective action. And we're seeing a highly strategic shift in labor's approach, particularly among highly paid technology workers who are often assumed to be immune to these traditional pressures.
The successful collective action by workers at that significant digital platform company, the Kickstarter case study we have, is a perfect illustration of this.
It is. They secured a truly historic victory by reframing their demands. They didn't pitch themselves as, privileged professionals seeking office perks.
Right.
They framed themselves as rank-and-file workers with traditional gripes, wages, hours, and job stability.
That framing made their collective action relatable and justifiable to the wider public and to traditional unions.
And the results were concrete. They agreed to a new minimum wage formula, which is a huge win for income protection and counteracting inflation, and they committed to negotiating the 4-day work week moving forward.
And crucially, they authorized strike action if those negotiations failed after a defined period of 12 weeks. This signals that job security is now just inextricably intertwined with work time. Workers are demanding that productivity gains be distributed via time, not just income.
That's the critical pivot point of this entire labor debate. AI-driven productivity gains are directly fueling the momentum behind demands for a reduced work week.
So this movement is fundamentally a distribution question for society.
It is. When AI makes us radically more productive, does that massive surplus manifest as reduced work hours? What some economists call the leisure dividend shared by the workforce? Or is it captured entirely as corporate profit and shareholder gain, just exacerbating that K-shape?
Wait, but isn't there massive pushback from firms arguing this is an unsustainable distribution model? I mean, how do companies justify giving up 20% of work time, even with productivity gains? Is this realistic for all sectors or just the high-margin tech sector?
That's where the fight is fiercest. The company line is always that the 4-day work week is only feasible for specific cognitive jobs where the output is easily measurable and the margins are high enough to absorb temporary dips.
But the data shows productivity spikes often offset the time reduction within months.
They do. But for continuous operations, say manufacturing, logistics, or elder care, the model has to shift to staggered, shift-based rotation, which introduces enormous scheduling complexity and overhead costs. So the pushback is real, and it's framed around logistical impossibility and competitive disadvantage.
But the workers are essentially forcing the hand of distribution. They're saying, if your system is so efficient, show us, give us our time back.
Exactly. And this movement is institutionalizing beyond the tech sector. Major traditional labor organizations are adjusting their bargaining strategy to account for AI. For instance, unions like the oil, chemical, and atomic workers are now explicitly demanding first-time contract provisions.
Provisions for what?
Provisions that bar AI from displacing, monitoring, or automatically disciplining their members.
Wow, that's a massive expansion of the traditional bargaining scope. Monitoring and discipline are direct challenges to corporate control over the workforce.
It is. They are moving beyond simple wage and benefits discussions to seeking structural protections against technological displacement and surveillance. The monitoring clause is perhaps the most significant.
Because companies want to use AI to track performance.
Track performance, measure breaks, enforce compliance through algorithmic management. If unions can block AI's ability to automatically discipline or fire members based on performance metrics, it fundamentally limits the power asymmetry created by pervasive digital surveillance.
But this raises a fascinating challenge. How do you enforce a contractual protection against an automation decision that is fundamentally a corporate strategy choice, an investment decision to buy an AI agent rather than hire a human?
You don't win that battle at the bargaining table alone, which is why these demands are being tied to strike authorizations and public pressure. The union strategy is twofold. Protect current members from immediate AI oversight and displacement, and, through the push for reduced work hours, ensure that future productivity benefits are shared broadly enough to mitigate the societal impact of the K-shaped economy they see forming. It's a battle over who gets to benefit from technological acceleration.
This dramatic restructuring of the job market creates enormous urgent pressure on the education system from K-12 right through to higher education.
For sure.
The dynamic here has evolved incredibly quickly over the last year. It moved from institutions panicking about AI enabling student cheating to proactively integrating it as a strategic pillar.
The shift from novelty to necessity is complete. AI is now cemented as a pillar of institutional strategy, not a pilot project or some experiment. Educational institutions are prioritizing solutions that measurably improve student outcomes and, crucially, equity.
So they're moving far beyond tools that simply digitize old practices or offer novel features.
Exactly. And this is leading directly to the mandate for AI fluency, ensuring that students are prepared for a labor market where working alongside AI is no longer optional. You see specific policy examples emerging already.
Like where?
Well, Ohio State University, for example, now requires every single student, regardless of their major, whether they're studying literature or engineering, to achieve AI fluency.
So that means learning to prompt, use, and evaluate AI tools responsibly and effectively across their academic domain.
That's it. Similarly, the California State University system launched a massive public-private initiative to build an AI-ready workforce, acknowledging that higher education must respond directly and immediately to industrial demands for that dual competency we talked about earlier.
The key mechanism driving improvement, though, is hyper-personalized learning. Our research team notes that chronic absenteeism, widening readiness levels, and severe mental health challenges are creating urgent educational needs that only scalable AI can adequately address.
That's right. AI-powered tutoring and assistance are becoming standard because they offer tailored, real-time feedback moment to moment based on individual readiness. Think of a student struggling with algebra. Instead of waiting for the next class, the AI assistant provides focused practice, identifies exactly where the cognitive gap is, and intervenes with specialized content delivered the way that specific student learns best.
So it effectively augments the teacher. It removes the massive burden of individualized support and focused practice for foundational skills.
Right, and it allows the human educator to concentrate on the higher-order instruction, critical thinking, and social-emotional learning that AI cannot replicate. It helps address learning gaps at scale, which is an equity issue.
And we can't ignore the pressure coming from the new generation of learners themselves. We need to acknowledge the imminent arrival of Gen Alpha on campuses.
A cohort born entirely after the smartphone and cloud tools became ubiquitous.
They are true digital natives.
More than that, they are natively fluent in AI and cloud-native tools. They enter the system with an expectation for a device-agnostic delivery model, meaning their learning tools must work seamlessly across their phone, tablet, laptop, or augmented reality headset, integrating information instantly.
This forces educators and administrators to rethink everything.
Curriculum, campus IT, physical space, all of it, to adapt to these new digital natives. The integration of AI isn't optional anymore. It's a condition of relevance for the entire system, from K-12 to post-secondary training, or they risk becoming obsolete.
Okay, let's unpack this. We've seen how AI is reshaping the employee mindset with sustainable realism, fundamentally transforming labor negotiations, and completely redefining the classroom curriculum with the mandate for AI fluency. We've been talking about the cognitive stack, the bits.
But to power this new world, to run those AI agents, train those massive models, and manage the resulting supply chain chaos, we need to look at the physical infrastructure. We must shift our focus from the bits to the atoms, because the digital revolution is fundamentally constrained by the physical world.
Yeah, the new bottleneck isn't processing speed, it is energy density.
Exactly.
Speaking of insights, if you're finding this insightful, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Tomorrow Unveiled, and consider hitting that new hype button to help us reach more viewers. And of course, be sure to turn on notifications so you never miss an update on the future.
And if you're listening on a podcast service like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we'd be incredibly grateful if you could leave us a rating and review for Tomorrow Unveiled. It truly helps us reach new listeners and allows us to continue providing these deep dives.
So energy has become the #1 gating factor for AI progress. The sheer, explosive, and exponentially growing power demand of artificial intelligence is now testing grid limits, revenue models, and even national sustainability goals.
It's transitioned very quickly from a utility issue to a national competitiveness issue.
What's fascinating here is the sheer scale. Our sources show that global data center power demand is projected to increase by a staggering 17% in 2026 alone. This isn't sustainable growth. It's exponential consumption that existing infrastructure just cannot easily absorb.
And to give you a sense of scale that really hits home, the research team projects this demand will reach over 2,200 terawatt hours by 2030.
And that is roughly equivalent to India's current total electricity consumption.
The entire country. We are essentially building an entire industrialized country's energy demand just for data centers over the next few years.
And the consequence of that growth isn't just a big number, it's local friction.
It is. That level of demand means that new data centers are increasingly competing directly with residential areas and traditional industries for power, potentially leading to localized energy shortages or massive price spikes for the everyday consumer.
So it directly impacts their ability to deal with inflation. It accelerates that K-shaped reality because reliable, affordable power becomes a premium commodity.
And this unprecedented demand is forcing tech giants to rethink their relationship with the public grid entirely. We are seeing the emergence of private energy islands.
Private energy islands.
Tech companies seeking to bypass public grid volatility and capacity constraints are effectively becoming de facto utilities. They're financing their own high-density, reliable power sources, including investments in small modular reactors, or SMRs, and high-efficiency turbines to power their massive data centers.
This isn't just about reducing costs, is it? It's about control, resilience, and speed.
It is. They view affordable, reliable energy as the foundational precondition for all other national objectives, including maintaining AI dominance. If you can't power the compute, you fall behind.
This infrastructure battle is also deeply linked to geopolitics and mineral security. Which brings us to a fascinating area of chemical innovation, methane pyrolysis.
Methane pyrolysis is a brilliant example of innovation stepping in to solve two distinct global problems at once: energy and supply chain resilience.
So explain simply how it works, because pyrolysis sounds a bit intimidating.
Sure. Essentially, instead of burning methane gas, which produces carbon dioxide and heat, you crack the methane molecule using high heat or catalysis. This process breaks the methane down into two valuable outputs: clean hydrogen, which can be used as a zero-emission fuel source,
Okay.
and solid carbon, which is produced in the form of synthetic graphite.
Why is that solid carbon, that synthetic graphite, so critical right now in the geopolitical context?
Because it links directly to supply chain resilience. China currently controls the vast majority of the world's refined natural graphite supply, which is essential for the anodes in nearly every lithium-ion battery.
Right, and they've used that control for leverage.
Exactly. China's leadership in clean energy supply chains has turned materials into a strategic card in geopolitical power games, leading to export controls. The synthetic graphite byproduct from methane pyrolysis allows North American and European battery production to bypass Chinese export controls on natural graphite entirely.
So they achieve mineral independence through a clean energy process.
That's the idea. Energy innovation, therefore, is deeply entangled with the military and economic need for resource security. And this hardware constraint brings us to what the research team is calling the copper-aluminum dilemma.
The copper-aluminum dilemma.
Copper is the backbone of the power grid. It's essential for high-efficiency energy transfer, especially in data centers. However, copper is becoming increasingly scarce and expensive. This is forcing engineers into reluctant adaptations, like using aluminum in critical grid roles where copper would be unequivocally superior.
But the problem with reluctant adaptation is that it imposes hidden costs, right?
It introduces enormous risks. Aluminum requires larger conductors and greater insulation, increasing the physical footprint and complexity of the system. Forcing the use of suboptimal materials risks widening the equity gap globally, particularly for the global south.
Why there specifically?
Because the cost of financing this new necessary infrastructure is already 2 to 3 times higher than in advanced economies due to structural financial bias. If they have to pay more for less efficient materials, the transition becomes even harder. The gritty reality of hardware constraints is shaping policy and equity outcomes worldwide.
So, moving from the energy grid to the factory floor, the next major trend is the explosion of physical AI.
AI embedded in machines that can move and interact with the real world.
And we are seeing a major convergence. The intelligence developed for self-driving cars is now being directly applied to general-purpose humanoid robots.
The sources cite a blockbuster deal that cements this convergence, the $900 million acquisition of Menti Robotics by Mobileye. This move, which they're dubbing Mobileye 3.0, is a strategic bet that the foundational autonomy stack developed for self-driving cars is fundamentally identical to the requirements for humanoid robots.
So the brain that teaches a car to navigate a chaotic city street can teach a robot how to navigate a chaotic factory floor or a home environment.
Exactly. The challenges are the same: collision avoidance, object recognition, prediction of human intent, and critically, safe operation across human-oriented environments. Mobileye CEO noted that this acquisition positions them as the brain provider for the next generation physical machines, and they're targeting 2028 for widespread commercial deployment of these AI-powered humanoids.
And this robotics revolution isn't a luxury in many parts of the world. It's driven by one immediate, massive need: demographic reality, especially in East Asia.
Yes, the sources present a compelling regional case study there. Look at Japan. With nearly 29% of its citizens aged 65 or older, they anticipate a shortfall of 570,000 caregivers by 2040.
570,000.
They simply cannot staff their critical social functions through human labor anymore.
So robotics isn't just a cost-cutting measure there. It's a necessary strategy for social stability. It's becoming an essential utility.
Precisely. Japan and China are aggressively embracing robotics to cope with rapidly aging populations and severe labor shortfalls, investing heavily in everything from silver tech for older care to advanced humanoid robot competitions. For these nations, physical AI is the only way to maintain economic function and care capacity in the face of irreversible demographic decline. It is an aggressive national-level adaptation.
The complexity of deploying these highly intelligent physical systems, robots, autonomous factories, new energy grids, It must be immense. So how are companies and governments managing the risk associated with these multi-billion-dollar physical investments?
The answer is simulation first. We're seeing the widespread adoption of digital twin technology as the default risk management strategy. This means modeling incredibly complex physics-level systems in a virtual environment before committing any real resources or capital expenditure.
The case of PepsiCo is striking here. Detail that collaboration with Siemens and NVIDIA.
They announced a multi-year collaboration to use physics-based digital twins. Their goal is, well, it's radical. They want to recreate every conveyor belt, every machine, every pallet route, and every human operator path virtually to simulate and optimize factory and supply chain layouts.
So they're running the factory thousands of times before they ever pour the concrete.
That's it. And the results show why this is now mandatory.
Okay, what were the results?
This digital-first planning strategy has delivered a 20% increase in throughput on initial deployments. More impressively, by identifying up to 90% of potential issues virtually, bottlenecks, stress points, failure modes, they achieve 10 to 15% reductions in capital expenditure. They avoid catastrophic mistakes that would cost millions in months in the real world.
And this approach is also moving into the public sector now, too.
It is. Government agencies are adopting Simulate First for everything from disaster response planning and cyber threat testing to trialing new AI governance policies.
The goal is simple, then. Forcing the system to fail fast and learn faster in the virtual world before putting real infrastructure, data, or reputation on the line.
Exactly. Simulation is moving from an optional high-tech tool to a necessity for managing risk in an increasingly automated and volatile physical world.
As technology accelerates, the regulatory landscape is fracturing, creating a truly chaotic and volatile environment for organizations trying to absorb AI into their workflows. In the U.S., the system is currently defined by a clash between state-level protections and a federal push for deregulation.
Yeah.
It's a classic disruptive patchwork problem.
It creates enormous uncertainty for businesses. As of January 1st, 2026, a patchwork of state laws has gone into effect, targeting specific high-risk areas. And these aren't just minor rules. These are structural protections designed to protect the average worker and citizen from algorithmic bias.
For example, Illinois' HB 3773 is now active. What does that mean for someone applying for a job?
It means that if an AI system is used in the hiring process, the company is prohibited from using proxy variables like ZIP codes or certain educational attainment metrics in a way that discriminates against protected classes. Critically, it also requires expansive notification of AI use for recruitment, hiring, and discipline.
And that transparency requirement forces corporate accountability.
And it offers a layer of defense against the AI-driven structural reorganization we discussed in Part 1.
Colorado's AI Act is another major piece of state legislation that focuses specifically on algorithmic discrimination in high-risk areas like hiring and compensation.
It requires employers with more than 50 employees to conduct annual impact assessments and establish risk management policies for their high-risk AI systems. This is crucial because if you are applying for a job, that annual impact assessment is designed to protect your opportunity against being unfairly shut down by a biased algorithm.
And then you have New York City with its own separate and distinct bias audit requirements.
Right, which are now being enforced, creating 3 different compliance standards for a single company operating nationally.
But this state-by-state move toward democratic regulation is being actively undermined by the federal government, creating that massive volatility you mentioned.
Correct. The current administration has issued an executive order, sometimes dubbed the One Rule Order, which signals a major push for federal preemption. The administration threatens to preempt or block states from enforcing what it deems onerous state laws.
Which creates massive uncertainty for companies trying to plan long-term compliance strategies.
They have to. They must prepare for state enforcement while simultaneously preparing for federal intervention that could wipe those rules away at any moment.
So this regulatory volatility forces companies to hedge their bets, absorbing AI rapidly while simultaneously waiting for a federal hammer to drop.
And you can contrast that chaotic U.S. environment with the parallel structured approach in the European Union. The EU AI Act has entered its phased implementation period, providing a much clearer roadmap, if a stricter one.
So what's the immediate impact of the EU AI Act right now?
The focus is on general-purpose AI or GPAI models. Providers of these large foundation models must now comply with new sweeping obligations. This includes publishing detailed summaries of the training data used for their models. This demand for transparency is fundamental to the European approach.
And for downstream users operating in the EU.
They now have to verify that their AI vendors are GPAI compliant to avoid supply chain disruptions and legal exposure. The EU is prioritizing transparency and safety standards on a continental scale, viewing AI regulation as infrastructure. Meanwhile, the U.S. remains locked in a battle over jurisdictional authority, prioritizing speed and deregulation over broad-based consumer and worker protection.
Now we shift from regulatory friction to outright geopolitical fracture. Our research team suggests the past week will be remembered as the moment the post-WWII international order began to formally dismantle.
That's a huge statement.
It is. The U.S. has announced a radical, sweeping retreat from global cooperation.
We are looking at a confirmed report that the U.S. has announced its intention to withdraw from the world's overarching climate treaty, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC.
But that's not all. This action is coupled with exiting 65 other international organizations.
65, including key scientific bodies like the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, and the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA. This signals a profound entrenchment of U.S. isolationism.
Exiting 65 organizations is not a minor policy change. It's a declaration of disengagement. What are the deeper implications of abandoning bodies like the IPCC and IRENA?
It fundamentally shifts the center of gravity for basic science and international standard setting. The U.S. loses its ability to shape global climate policy, public health standards, and critically, the technical specifications for emerging green technology. When you leave the table, others set the rules.
And this coincides perfectly with reports of China aggressively funding the infrastructure of the future.
Notably achieving a major breakthrough in fusion energy this same week. Yes.
That highlights a massive divergence in strategic priorities. China investing heavily in future abundance and physical infrastructure, and the U.S. retreating from multilateralism and focusing on immediate resource extraction.
And this retreat is coupled with an aggressive, revanchist assertion of power, crystallized by what the research team calls the Don Rowe Doctrine.
The Don Rowe Doctrine.
This is a military-backed reinterpretation of the Monroe Doctrine, asserting a right to unilateral military intervention in the Western Hemisphere for explicit transactional imperialism.
Let's detail the factual consequences of this military intervention, Operation Absolute Resolve.
The operation resulted in the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and the installation of a government favorable to U.S. resource interests. Crucially, the motivation was not framed in the language of humanitarian aid or democracy promotion that we've seen in decades past.
No, the administration was brazenly transparent.
Completely. Explicitly stating that American companies are now poised to extract Venezuela's oil wealth under new favorable terms.
This isn't just policy. It's a throwback to 19th century colonial gunboat diplomacy, but now executed with 21st century precision. It demands a moment of serious pause. What was the global fallout?
The fallout was immediate and profound. The European Union was caught completely flat-footed, remaining largely silent, a silence interpreted by analysts as shock, paralysis, and an underlying fear of losing the U.S. security umbrella.
And China.
Predictably, condemned the act as hegemonic and a blatant violation of sovereignty. But the most significant long-term consequence is in Latin America.
Right.
The intervention galvanized anti-American sentiment, destabilizing the region and sparking massive protests. It proved that in this new world, technological military dominance can be used for explicit resource wars. This move severely damages U.S. soft power and pushes nations in the region closer to alternative security and financial partners, namely China.
It's a geopolitical regression coupled with technological acceleration.
And this high-stakes game of resource control extends to Asia, where technology is being used as a card in what the research team calls sovereign protectionism. We are talking about rising China-Japan tensions.
China is weaponizing trade controls.
They are. They initiated an investigation into dichlorosilane imports, a critical gas for advanced semiconductor manufacturing from Japan. More aggressively, they banned certain dual-use exports to Japan following diplomatic friction over Taiwan.
The term dual use is vague and can be expansive, allowing them broad discretion. What exactly does this ban cover?
The dual-use list is massive. It covers over 800 items, including advanced navigation systems, specialty chemicals, and critical rare earths. These are materials and components that China dominates the supply chain for, and they are essential for Japanese high-tech manufacturing.
What's the implication for Japan's economy if this ban persists?
It's substantial. A prolonged ban could result in a $16 billion decline in production for Japan's electronics and automobile sectors. This demonstrates the fragility of global supply chains and how geopolitical friction can instantly weaponize technology and materials, forcing companies to constantly monitor trade flows for potential strategic tariffs or export curbs. In this world, the supply chain is the military front line.
We've covered the ascent of technology and the regression of geopolitics. Now we must connect those two trends to the single greatest systemic risk identified by the research team, the widening equity gaps or the next great divergence.
This concept, highlighted by global development organizations, describes a world where the benefits of abundance, personalized health, fusion energy, automated productivity are being narrowly concentrated, while the risks, job displacement, geopolitical instability, climate costs, are being distributed across the global population unevenly.
Let's look at the precarious economic structure in the U.S. The apparent strength, like the 4.3% GDP growth reported by some analysts, it masks a shaky foundation.
A very shaky one. Without massive, concentrated AI-related spending, the U.S. economy might actually be in recession.
And the concentration of wealth is fundamentally unstable.
The 7 largest tech companies alone represent 60% of all S&P 500 gains, creating a closed, high-margin loop. The high-income class benefits from wealth effects from tech stock appreciation, funding their exit strategy, even as underlying stagnation persists for the majority. They are creating their own prosperity bubble that is disconnected from the economic reality of Main Street.
This inequity is far starker when we look at the Global South financing constraint on clean energy, which relies on a concept called WACC.
Now break that down for us.
WACC stands for the weighted average cost of capital. For our listeners, think of WACC as the required rate of return that investors demand before they will fund a project. If the WACC is too high, the project is dead, even if it's environmentally sound.
And this is where the structural bias hits. Clean energy equipment like solar panels or wind turbines is priced similarly worldwide thanks to global trade.
But the cost of capital, the WACC, is 2 to 3 times higher in emerging markets or the Global South.
Right. That financing gap is driven by a deep structural bias in the global financial system. Investors conflate sovereign risk, the general risk of a low-rated jurisdiction, with project risk, the actual fundamentals of a renewable energy project.
So a perfectly sound solar farm in India with guaranteed government contracts might be priced with an interest rate exceeding 12% compared to 4-6% for an identical project in Europe, simply because of its geography.
The system is mispricing risk, which essentially prices sustainability out of reach for the markets that need it the most to manage climate change.
And this compounds in-country inequality.
It does. We have communities near mineral mines, say cobalt in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, or lithium in Zimbabwe, bearing the environmental and social costs of the green transition without sharing in the enormous financial benefits.
So they are absorbing the pollution and the instability caused by the resource extraction that powers the electric cars and AI systems in the developed world.
That's the brutal reality. Without strong safeguards and governance, this mineral boom risks reinforcing corruption and deepening inequality, rather than funding a just transition. The barrier to solving climate change and achieving global prosperity is no longer technical. It's entirely financial and structural.
So if capital is misallocated globally, access is fractured locally. The digital divide persists, now entering a phase we might call digital divide 2.0.
Yeah.
Globally, 2.6 billion people still lack reliable internet access. Even if they get access, there's a massive skills gap, with 70% of jobs projected to require post-secondary training by 2031.
And this is where technology creates a new class stratification, not just of wealth, but of mental bandwidth and privacy. We're seeing the cultural rise of the neo-Luddite resistance people protesting or even targeting infrastructure like autonomous vehicles with traffic cones, viewing them as symbols of labor displacement and surveillance.
Culturally, the surge in dumb phone sales, those simple brick-like phones, signals a growing premium on disconnection, particularly among younger generations seeking to escape the smartphone AI dopamine axis.
But here's the rub, and this is where the class marker appears. The ability to disconnect is becoming a luxury item. The wealthy can afford to opt out, paying for human-centered services, human tutors, human consultants, human privacy, and retreating from the constant digital tether.
Meanwhile, the sproletariat, the working class, remains fundamentally tethered to devices for basic services and, critically, for accessing gig work. They cannot afford to disconnect. Their livelihood depends on being constantly available to the algorithm that manages their next delivery or task.
And this leads directly to the ultimate exit strategy for the globally mobile, high-skill class, the peak of the K. For those with means, the solution to domestic and political instability is simply relocation. Digital nomadism has matured from a niche subculture into a robust, accessible Plan B.
That shift is profound. We're talking about highly skilled workers fundamentally abandoning faith in their own nation's stability and choosing connectivity, reliable governance, and safety over traditional patriotism or geography.
The infrastructure supports it now. Global eSIMs, Starlink satellite internet, and specialized nomad visas in over 50 countries designed to attract high-earning, low-cost residents. Our sources refer to this as a potential brain drain of the creative class, with professionals relocating to politically stable jurisdictions in Europe or Asia.
And they're seeking safety and reliable connectivity in response to domestic unrest and an aggressive, alienating foreign policy.
And this relocation is the ultimate expression of the dual competency requirement. You use technical literacy to earn enough to buy the resilience and stability that your original country can no longer guarantee.
So, what does this all mean? If we synthesize the sources from this incredibly dense deep dive, we are clearly on two distinct contradictory trajectories simultaneously.
On one hand, we have the abundance technocracy, a world defined by limitless energy potential through breakthroughs like fusion, the radical deflation of healthcare costs through personalized AI doctors and tutors, and resilient, localized food supplies through vertical farming.
This suggests unprecedented prosperity is technologically achievable, likely led by Asian intellectual property and investment in the physical stack.
On the other hand, we have the regressive autocracy, characterized by the U.S. slide into isolationism and authoritarianism, marked by doctrines like transactional imperialism. This leads to a deepening K-shaped economy, where the majority face higher costs for basic goods and reduced economic mobility, fueled by AI-driven disinformation and the fragmentation of truth.
To survive and thrive in this bifurcated world, the research team offered 3 concrete, actionable insights for the future-proofed listener, strategies drawn directly from observing those who are successfully navigating this transition.
First, jurisdictional diversification. Resilience in 2026 means intentionally pursuing geographic risk reduction, not being overly exposed to the political risk of a single nation-state.
So diversify your residency options, banking, and income streams across stable jurisdictions to protect against domestic volatility.
Second, invest in the physical stack. The next wave of true value creation is moving away from purely digital software and into the physical manifestation of AI and abundance. Think robotics, fusion energy infrastructure, defense manufacturing, and the materials needed to power them.
Capital should flow strategically to atoms, not just bits.
And third, mandate literacy. AI fluency is not optional, it is foundational. You must invest heavily in your education, your reskilling, and lifelong learning to ensure you are working alongside the next generation of AI agents, rather than being replaced by them. This is the core of the dual competency requirement.
The next 12 to 24 months are pivotal. We have the technology to solve the world's most difficult problems right now. The question is no longer whether technological abundance is possible, but whether society will choose to distribute it.
And that is the final provocative thought we leave you with. Will this abundance be distributed through mandatory reduced work hours and broad wage increases, allowing the majority to share in the leisure dividend, securing stability for all?
Or will it be captured entirely as corporate and shareholder gain, accelerating the structural decline for the working class and cementing the regressive autocracy? The outcome hinges on the policy choices made right now.
We love hearing your thoughts. Whether you're on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, leave a comment and let us know what you think about being future-proofed in a world of accelerating technology and geopolitical instability.
This has been a deep dive for Tomorrow Unveiled. We'll be back soon with another exploration of the future.